Biz, where we talk about the marketing and business side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. And today I have a really special treat for you. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kristi Hustak, and she's the only board-certified plastic surgeon of a practice of 7 plastic surgeons. They're in Houston. It's a very prestigious group called Aesthetic Center for Plastic Surgery in Houston. Now they have private state-of-the-art surgical center, as well as 2 locations. Now what's super interesting is Dr. Hustak was born on an Apache Indian Reservation in Whiteriver, Arizona. And to look at her, you'd never guess that. So she started her training in Ohio, and I'm going to abbreviate this. So she starts in Ohio. She completed a medical mission in Peru. She graduated Magna Cum Laude from the Ohio State University College of Medicine. She married her best friend and her classmate, and then settled in Texas, where they're raising 3 children. Do you believe that? Dr. Hustak, it is a pleasure to have you on Beauty and the Biz. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we have to start with the Indian Reservation. How in the world did you end up on an Indian reservation in Arizona?
Yeah. I have genetically tested myself. So it is true, because I could have guessed I was the milkman's baby as well. But yeah, so my mom's Apache. Now my bloodline's been diluted out. So I'm only an 8th now. But my dad is Mexican-American, but some Spanish blood. So my mom has a little bit of Irish. My dad has a little bit of Spanish. So somehow that combination became me. But yeah, so they met. My mom grew up on the res and married my dad, who was in the small town next to the reservation. And so that's how they met. And so I was born on the res, but I only lived there for about 5 years before my parents separated. And then I moved up to the big city of Phoenix. But yeah, so that's where the story began. My grandparents still live there. I have some aunts and uncles still on the res. And so we go back, once every couple of years or so to visit, not that often, but yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a funky thing. In Arizona, it's not super weird because there's a lot of native blood there. But certainly once I've gotten out of Arizona, people are like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. And I was like, oh, I guess that is unique. Yeah.
It really is. I've never heard of that before. I've never met anybody who's been on an Indian reservation. So good for you. What a nice background,
Yeah. Yeah, I think so much your background colors who you become. And I think part of that probably gave me a hunger to try something different because college really isn't on the radar of most people graduating from the res. You never leave. It's a very small knit community. And that's part of why they recruit from the reservation to give these kiddos a chance. And so although I didn't go to high school there, my mom did, and was recruited actually for art. She's an artist by trade. And then she got knocked up at 17 and did not go, but that's not uncommon for the reservation. There's a big fear to leave your little happy nest. And so it is neat when you get a chance to get out and try new things for sure.
Then how did plastic surgery get on your radar? Was it from the Indian Reservation?
Yes, no, it was not. So my mom, when they separated, she had to put herself through school to learn a trade. And so she went into surgical technology school. So her and my aunt actually lived together and were single moms and raised us. One went to day school, one went to night school, and they cross-trained to be able to raise the kiddos. And so that's how I got interested in medicine. And then her first job was with a plastic surgeon. So I got to kind of get immersed in that early on. I saw my first surgery at 14, which was an employee who allowed me to come into the operating room because I said I was interested in medicine and blood and guts didn't scare me. And I loved it. I mean, I got a little bit nauseous with lipo. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like not natural. And so as a 14-year-old, that creeped me out and I got a little nauseous, but certainly fell in love with the trade and your ability to kind of mold the body in different ways. And I think coming from a family of artists, I am not very good on canvas. My mom used to make us paint our own pictures as kids, and mine were awful. Like my flowers, like not good. But the big joke is that obviously my medium was not canvas; it was the human body, and so I think my creative outlet is there.
So you always knew, even going to medical school, you always knew it was going to be plastic surgery. Even when you were doing rounds on other specialties, you were all set?
Hindsight's always 2020, but I think there is something about natural inclination and mentorship. My kindergarten yearbook says doctor. There was no doctors in my family, which is really funny. It's a doctor/sports journalist. So I don't know. There you go. But my high school yearbook and all through high school, it says desire to be a plastic surgeon when I graduated high school. So I think that was always in the back of my mind. I mean, I rebelled in training, medical training, because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. And then it was funny how I love this, I love this, and actually I loved everything. It just in the end, once I hit plastics, I was like, okay, you're right. This is definitely me.
So I don't even know how you got through school and fellowship and residency and pregnancy all at the same time, but we can talk about it if you like, because that's insane to me. I have a dog that I barely can keep alive. I don't know how you're doing it with 3 children. That's very admirable. Any secrets, by the way, of how you're doing that?
Outsource. I think that's the only way you can survive is I give myself grace. I am never going to be a super doc, a super mom, a super, Pinterest. I'm never going to sew their uniforms for sports, and I have to triage what I enjoy. I enjoy cooking. So I do that. I don't enjoy the grocery shopping. So I don't do that. I don't enjoy laundry. I don't enjoy trash. I don't enjoy gardening. And those things just have to go. So I have to just triage my time because there's just so many hours in a day. And so I do what I enjoy and I outsource the rest. My husband laughs at me all the time because he's like, God, you hired one more person to do this. And I said, yes. He's like, but I asked you to do that. I said, yes, there is no time. And so I decided not to do it. So he's like, you just hire people. And I said, yes, I do.
Good for you.
I can
hear you. Yep. Instagram or Instacart was the greatest thing that ever happened. Amazon, another good one. I love. So good for you. So you're in Ohio and I don't know if you started the family yet, but how did you end up in Texas?
Yeah. So, I'll start from the res. So, born on the res, went to school in Phoenix, and then, Ohio State is a big minority recruiter actually. And so they recruited me because of my background of the res, and I'm half Mexican as well. Again, you wouldn't believe it. Wow. And so I was in student council at the time. I was, a vice president. And so I was helping everybody set up their college booth. And I was at one of the largest high schools in Arizona. And so we had one of the largest college fairs. And so I just happened to help Ohio State set up their booth and they were chatting with me and one thing led to another and they said, hey, come check out Ohio State. I said, it's far away. Where is Ohio again on the map? Yeah. That just was not on my radar. I'm in Arizona. Why would I go to cold? That's reverse. Mm-hmm. But I flew out for a recruitment trip and I loved it. It was exactly what I thought college would be. Everybody had Ohio State t-shirts on. The campus was all inclusive. Everybody was singing, go Buckeyes. The whole state rallies around college. And I think in my mind, that's what I expected. I expected a small community within a bigger university. And I think that's what I got. So I flew out there. My mom cried. She shipped a box and flew out with me and flew back and dropped me off in the middle of Ohio on a whim. But they both raised me to be independent. And they said, go spread your wings. And there I went. So it was, I was the first person to go to college in my family. So you can imagine going to college and far away was pretty crazy, but I think it was awesome because I grew, I had to depend on myself and figure it out. And I think that there's some benefit to that as well, because you learn that independence. And so I did that at Ohio and then went to undergrad there and stayed for medical school. Met my hubby first day of medical school, actually. I had met him briefly in undergrad. We run a similar scholarship. So I had kind of like met him casually, but not anything. And then the first day of school, he was like, hey, I remember you. And we sat next to each other and that was that. So married him at the end of the 4 years of high school or of medical school.
Oh, that's so cute. Then how did Texas get in
so he's an anesthesiologist. And so the way that medical training works is you apply for residencies, you interview places, and then it goes into a computer. It's called the match. And so they changed it where you can couples match. So you can go with a spouse or a best friend even, or a life partner. You don't have to be married. But that was to prevent you from being coastal because that's hard on relationships. So back in the days, it didn't matter. You could be New York City and you could be LA, and then that's just where you go for 6 years. Like there is no choice. And so now they link those applications. So they take you or leave you as a pair. And so we highly ranked a lot of places where we both could live, which makes sense. And Texas has a fantastic medical community, tons of hospitals and training programs here. So that's why it was so high on our list. And it was warmer weather, which was important to me. I was sick of Ohio winters. And I said, even if we live in Ohio the rest of our lives, let's go take a sabbatical for a couple of years and try some new training. And so we landed in Texas, and then have stayed because we just love it. So we've been here about 14 years now.
Oh, wow. And then
Yeah.
you've been with this practice for 7 years. So when you
Yeah.
first got there, did you, how did you
How
start?
does that?
What?
Yeah. So so at the end of training, when you're looking to decide whether or not to do additional training like fellowships or to go in practice. So my husband finished a couple years ahead of me. So he joined on as academic faculty at the university where we trained. So he was there very comfortable, very happy, but also mobile. So we could kind of go anywhere. And so we started looking locally and remotely. But most people do end up practicing because you make connections where you trained. And so we made a lot of great connections here. And one of my partners that now trained with me. And so he said, hey, I know you're looking to go somewhere. I know you're thinking academics. What if I told you we could make this academic but you would still have the benefit of private practice? What would you say? And I said, oh, I was trying to figure everything out. And I said, well, let's meet for dinner. Let's chat a little bit. And in the end, we all met for a dinner with the other 6 surgeons who I had met superficially, but never really worked with. Turns out that was my interview. It was great that I didn't know about it because I was very casual, and they offered me a job position the next week. And I was like, oh. And so I sat down with my husband and I was like, I feel like I'm selling out, cosmetics. I feel like I can, take a piece of tissue from your back and make a breast out of it. Like, why am I, going to do this? And then he was like, oh my gosh, there are so many ways that you can train the next generation with private practice. You have flexibility. As a mom, I had 2 kids in residency. So as a mom, you can make your own schedule. If you want to have muffins with mom, go have muffins with mom. And you can do that. And I was like, God, from a quality of life standpoint, because I'm blessed I don't have to work because I married a doctor. Haha. Isn't that what your parents tell you to do? But I love what I do. And so there's lots of flexibility in that as well. So that's kind of how I joined this practice, is they were looking for a female, something to differentiate themselves. And I was looking for something with flexibility and where I could still teach. And so we actually have our own fellowship and we train the residents where I trained. So I get the best of both worlds. I am not tenured. I'm not required to present and do research, but I can train people and I can do research if I want to. So it's like the perfect hybrid.
Gotcha. Now, I've worked with quite a few practices throughout the world, actually, and the more surgeons you add, the more complexity you add to it. How in the world do all of those personalities come to a decision? Is this a democracy or a...
Yeah. Oh gosh. So this is such a great conversation because it is incredibly rare, as you know, to have. Oh, I have a surprise too. We're adding the 8th come July. We're keeping one of our fellows, Abigail Rodriguez, who is another female. So I'm very excited to have some more estrogen. But it's very rare with cosmetic in general. We take no insurance. So we're all fighting over the same pot of money in the same region, which that's incredibly rare. But my 3 senior partners have been together, gosh, going on 30 years now. And so I think and they were together from the get-go. So there was never any one captain of the ship. So I think from the beginning, they learned how to compromise. And I think that sets the tone because this is a marriage of sorts. And that's the only way this works, is to be able to sit down once or twice a month, to be very transparent and to be on the same playing field. I joke with my partners that the reason I chose to join them is because they're all married to their first wives. And that told me that they could compromise and they've been together. I mean, there's something to that, right?
Yep,
that they could survive that in the midst of a crazy medical career. And so that's how I knew that there was some real opportunities there for partnership. And from day one, they have been transparent with everything business wise. I know how much they make. They know how much I make, and every ounce in between. And I think that there's no secrets there. Even if we disagree, at least we disagree in the reasons why openly.
Yeah.
Yep. So we meet twice a month now. So we have partner meetings at 6 a.m. twice a month to really iron out business. And then we've all set it up kind of in a corporate structure with MD oversights. So we all take turns every 2 to 3 years on some oversight. So I'm our medical directory of our surgical center right now. Somebody else is overseeing marketing. Somebody else is overseeing clinics. Somebody else is overseeing research. Somebody else is overseeing the fellowship. So by each one of us MDs being on top of one of those things and taking turns, we rotate through. we get to learn every ounce more intricately of that business structure. And I think, and then being able to recognize like, wow, that really sucked. Thanks for doing that for 2 to 3 years. And then we can shift gears and things like that. So that's how we make it work, is by just staying open and having these meetings with agendas with our managers to kind of keep it all transparent.
So the way you're set up, is it a partnership plus associates who could become partners?
Yeah.
How are you set up for that?
Yeah. So we're set up with a partnership plus associates. So once you hit a certain threshold of income, then you're considered for true partnership. And then we have our medical spas and our surgical center, which are income producing, right? So then there's opportunities to kind of shift and buy into those as we progress. And so that's kind of how we set up.
You're buying into the various profit centers and to build up equity, right?
You got it. Yep. So I'm a partner of our surgical center, our medical spas as well.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Can you be a partner of the medical spa and not a surgery center? Do you get to pick and choose, or
when we shifted, we're the 3 seniors and the 3 associates at the time. Right. Now we have 2 juniors coming in, even below that. We set it up as a separate entity. That being said, we're getting ready to spread it out this year where they're all 3 going to be separate variables. Yep. So I do think that option is going to come. But when we set it up initially, we bundled the surgical center and spa because it was right at the time we could build those out. And so for the build out loans and whatnot, it just made more sense to combine those at the time under a separate S corp. But now we're actually getting ready to spin those out. So each one will be separate.
Yes, I would highly recommend that. That's good.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. And that's kind of as it's progressed, we're like, okay, this doesn't make sense from this perspective. Yeah.
Well, so now the 3 gentlemen who started 30 years ago, they've got to be getting up there in their 60s or 70s. Is there a plan of succession? How are you going to?
Yes. Yeah. So it's so funny because this has been a big discussion over the last 3 to 4 years, because their plan originally was 3 seniors and they'd shift to the 3 juniors, and there'd almost be a flop. Because as we're discovering, and a lot of surgeons are discovering, your business is you. So as you phase out, that now we have an extender. So we have some nurse practitioners, some RNs, and our med spas that help run that. Again, there's only so many hours in a day, I can't be operating and injecting 24/7. There's just not enough time. And so we do have some fantastic extenders. But the idea was they have a book of business as well that's under each one of us. And so, as they rotate out, would they go and just continue that book of business and some oversight of their patients in the medical spa? That can be their tail as they kind of transition out of surgical practice. And then later in 5 years later, then they retire completely and sell out their shares of the practice to the younger generation. So that's kind of how we've got it set up right now. As they phase out, there's a tail in the med spa, and then that will phase out completely at some certain time point.
Well, where I find there are some hiccups where it can go sideways is when you're sharing expenses, but you've got that high producer who's, the guy who's going to crush it. And then you have somebody like you who actually wants a life, work-life balance.
Oh, for sure.
How do you figure all that out? Are the expenses even or due to via production of revenue?
It's via production, and that's the only way it could make our practice make sense, because otherwise your high producers, my senior partners who have been in practice for 30 years, it doesn't make sense for me coming in at 7 years, even though I'm on an upswing. I'm just not as busy as them. That's just the reality of it. But I'm also not utilizing as many resources.
Sure.
And so there is, we've worked out by production. So there's a lion's share of my high producers are paying more of the overhead. There's some shared of capital expenses and things like that. But globally, we share profits on the back end by your productivity as well. So I don't make as much, but it's not necessarily inhibiting the growth of my senior partners.
And everyone feels well paid. They don't feel because here's where it runs into trouble, when there starts to be some resentment over, I work more than you, I bring in more than you, I should be whatever, treated better. That's where some problems start, or even with the sales leads, how do you divvy up that?
Yeah, I would say I think we feel very well reimbursed for what we're producing. That I think has been really ironed out well. I think we're all globally very happy with that. I think that's very transparent and equitable. I do think that one of the difficulty comes in with how do we share those sales calls? So the way that we've done it is a doc of the day. So we have a call center, We're big enough now with the many partners we
Nice.
have. We have 89 full-time employees. So it's gotten to be a big production between the two offices in Metzval Surgical Center. And so we've had a call center where we have 4 gals. And so the way that works is by a doc of the day. There was no other good way to do it. So if somebody calls in and doesn't have a definitive doctor, whoever that doc of the day is where our team is going to funnel those patients. There's a couple, like I do female genital rejuvenation. That's my niche in the practice. So a lot of labiaplasties and vaginoplasties. Nobody else in my practice does internal vaginal work. So that's a natural cleft. If somebody calls for that, it goes to me. I have one partner who does butt implants. Nobody else in practice does butt implants. I have another one of my partners that does complicated secondary rhinoplasties. Nobody else does that. So those get funneled to him. So there's a couple small niches that go to that direct doc. But globally, we do it by doc of the day, and that rotates now on a 7-day basis based on the docs.
Okay, good for you. Do you all get along?
Fantastically. I think globally, I mean, it's a marriage. I mean, there's certain moments where like, crap, so-and-so's at it again, or, those simple things like that, or like, oh God, so can't so-and-so take responsibility? Oh my gosh, just like any marriage, there's that cattiness that's small, but relatively incredibly small. Like, I think these are some of the most fantastic people, let alone fantastic surgeons, but people. And I think that makes a difference. There's nobody there that drives me bonkers. I would go have a beer with every single one of them and their spouses any day. And that's helpful. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this is a miracle. It's a miracle. It's so unusual that I can just tell you from a different perspective, good for you. If you can all pull that off all these years too. I also bet it's also about your values. You all value marriage, commitment, communication, getting along.
I think there's something to that. We've had in the group, there's been maybe 2 people that left over the last 30 years. And I know at least one of them that was part of it. Like, I want to be captain of the ship. And there's just, you have to have that personality that you're not going to be the lead boss, but you're going to get these other benefits. And you're right. I think we triage people that value those things.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So when it comes to staff, what I have noticed is the staff they're like little kids and parents. They'll go to the parent who says yes to them, and they can often create a lot of havoc if the doctors let them come direct. Is there some type of a buffer between all of you and all the staff, or how is that handled? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I would say that sometimes that still naturally happens, right? And then we have to have, as part of our partner discussions, like we have 2 different offices. A couple of us go to both, so that's easy, but there's a couple that only go to one. So then they feel like the parent of that clinic and that staff. And so they're like, oh, we had a team bonding party, but then only that staff was invited, and that breeds animosity, right? Yes. So we've had to kind of have conversations over the years that like, we got to be really fair when it comes to staff. You cannot buy Christmas presents, even if it's just a Starbucks gift card on your own to this staff, because that breeds resentment. So we try to do staff parties twice a year. Our staff all get bonuses on productivity for the practice that gets separated equally. So there's things like that. We try to be really good. We have a manager at each office, an oversight manager at each office, and then manager over like Metzval Surgical Center, et cetera. Okay. And so they keep us in line because they're the buffer. So when they try to come to us docs directly, we say, that's not how it goes. You go to your first line of defense, who will liaison with us, because we're pushovers, no question about it. I mean, I will be a pushover to my patients. Yep. Can I have a discount? Sure. But it's a business, so that I don't talk finances. Same thing with my staff. Hey, can I do this? Can I take off early today? Sure. That's not how it goes, though, right? So we really rely on our managers to be that buffer for us. And then, they'll usually run stuff by us, be like, hey, what about X, Y, and Z? But we try to be really good about separating ourselves from that. Mm-hmm. And in this kind of corporate structure, I think that works a little bit better. It's not perfect all the time. They're like, hey, but so-and-so said I could do this and blah, blah, blah. And we're really good about being like, that's not how that works. So sorry. Right. And then we go and have a conversation with them. You can't do that. Okay, fine. Okay. And they say sorry, and that's it. It's what it is. But
when you were in medical school, I maybe because you're newer, maybe they now taught business in medical school. Were you shocked at the business side of plastic surgery when you entered like a real practice that works as a business?
Yes. I'm still shocked. I mean, it is, I think one of the best benefits of going with these partners is that they had 20 plus years of tried and true, right? So they've made those mistakes. They still do not teach business in medicine. They don't. And for lots of years, this was supposed to be. So part of it is we set up medicine to not be in business. We were always supposed to be healers, and we were never supposed to be involved in businesses. But as we know through Medicare, Medicaid, and politics, that's not the case anymore. So, and especially with private practice and stuff, medicine is unfortunately, if you talk to doctors, a business. So we have to learn how do you adapt. So many of these principles are against every grain of our being as a doctor who is supposed to do anything selflessly. So I think it's hard for most of us to figure that out. And that's why we surround ourselves with people that understand business, but you have to learn so you don't get taken advantage of. I mean, fraud is rampant, in practices because we're not business people, we're just not. And so I think you have to surround yourself with good people because as you know, I mean, that's we're not built for medicine and we're still not. But I learn a lot by sitting with managers. Again, on these meetings, we talk about our areas of marketing and ROI and why we're using different certifications for certain things, HR details, when we shifted from doing internal HR to having a national organization take over the HR and the paychecks, and not having to do our Excel spreadsheets and crap like that. And so, trying to enlist a more corporate structure has been beneficial, but there's learning curves for sure.
Let me back up and talk about that conference or the call center.
Yeah.
I just think that's brilliant. I think it, just like you do in your personal life, business should be that too. Why not outsource what you're not good at? You could stop and try to get good at that, or you can outsource it to somebody who's really, really good at it, but watch what they're doing. You don't just abdicate, you give somebody responsibility, but you watch over it, you trust and verify.
We cold call these gals often. Yep. We do cold call them just to see where they're at, how they're presenting it, to make sure they're doing doc of the day as they're supposed to, if nobody had that voice in, and do that. Cause we have, like you said, you have to verify, trust, but verify. And so that's been, once a month we do cold call them, and we have absolutely fired people because of it.
Yep. And are they in-house or are they external?
In-house. Well, COVID's been a funky year, so they have been a lot at home because that's one of those that can easily be done at home. But otherwise, we have a whole call center with cubicles that are kind of separated for sound buffers, and they actually like that because they can bounce things off of each other. We have all of our brochures and information, so if they're looking for something, they can actually be like, "Oh, let me send you to Dr. Hustak," and actually they'll grab it off the shelf. They'll put it in a package and they'll send it that day to that patient, letting them know, they've made this appointment with me and sending me all my information to them. So part of our practice is we're an umbrella, but we each have an individual identity. And I think that's probably something different too. We each have our own website. We each have our own patient coordinator, and we each have our own marketing staff. That's ours under a big umbrella. So I think that keeps us, a little bit more fair too. So if you're putting more marketing dollars, you have more staff, you'd expect that you'd probably have a little more productivity, and vice versa. So that's one way that we kind of keep it more fair from that perspective as well.
So regarding marketing, we'll talk about that next. Yeah. If you want to spend more on marketing than somebody else, you can, but then that comes out of your expenses, right?
Absolutely. So we have a 5% budget for ACPS. The rest is all under our individual. So the way that we have it set up is a certain percent of my productivity obviously goes to my A&P, after my implants and everything goes to the practice. And that's what helps pay for the overhead, including this budget for global marketing. So that's our billboards and our magazine. So our branding all comes out of that massive budget, and then we can spend more. And as us younger docs, one cool thing that they did with my contract that I think was brilliant is they required me to, as part of to keep 10% aside of my own dollars for marketing. So it forced me to market in the beginning in those years that you wouldn't want to as you're building a practice. And I think that was instrumental in growing me as quick as I did. And I used some of that money for like my national associations and travel and things. So it didn't have to be all marketing, but I would have never spent $20,000 on, some branding ads and things like that. Had I not had that money that was automatically set aside. And so I think that was brilliant because they kept it. It was my money, but they kept it in a little nest egg with the practice for me so I could pull from that.
That's a great idea, by the way. So when you first joined the practice, they didn't just hand you a bunch of patients. You had to go work for it.
Yeah, I had to go work for it. So in the beginning where we had to, take call and sign up with hospitals and all that stuff, you had to do some of the legwork. Now, that being said, I'm busier than I probably deserve to be by association. So by being the only female that was there, by being the young one whose schedule was wide open, you could wait 2 months with this doc and pay $100 consult fee, or you could go tomorrow with this doc who's new, but obviously great because they picked her and she's available next week for free. So by that association, I got patients that were calling the main center. We're like, let me read about her a little bit. Cool. Yeah. Put her with me. She's free and she's available next week. That's fantastic. Yeah.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
So is there give me a big pro and then a big con of working for this huge operation?
Yeah. I mean, I think the pro is that I have partners to bounce ideas off of. So I can say, hey, listen, I have this problem patient. It's kind of like we used to call them tumor boards or, morbidity and mortality conferences. When you have your problem patients, difficult patients, I have 6 people that I can run that by. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. What stitch? How do you think I should approach this? So from a technical standpoint, having that access is fantastic. Most private guys go to their meetings to get that. I get that every single day by association with these docs. So I think having that extra security net of problem patients and difficult cases is really fantastic because it gives you the confidence to really take really good care of people, which is great. I think one of the cons is kind of what you alluded to earlier. It takes a little bit more to get things done sometimes from the business standpoint because we've kind of shifted the rules where we didn't have to have unanimous decisions because that just with 6 different minds, it was really difficult sometimes. Hey, I want to buy this machine. It's new and cutting edge, but it's $250,000. I don't need that machine. I will never use it. I don't do face cases. Yep. So how do you then, do that? Well, the face guy's like, I'll use this a bunch. And so we've kind of worked out algorithms for that. Where majority wins. So as long as you have 4 of the 6 votes, that was there. And then any kind of capital expenses over a certain amount, we decided we all, needed different kind of vote structures for, but that was the only way we could get it done. And then separating out the profit from that. So making sure the high users were paying the lion's share of the expenses for it, but then some of that profit was going to everybody to pay for those machines and bring in patients and things like that.
You know what I find interesting with the way you guys market? It looks like there's the big umbrella, the big practice, and then all of you have your own individual Instagrams, websites, or all of you, or no? It feels like some of you are really into social media and some are not. Is that?
I think that depends on your social media or your personality. I think we're all trying to have a better footprint on social media. But I think some people are just naturally better at it. Like I have one of our younger surgeons, Dr. Elzokum, that I was talking about earlier. He's fantastic. He's just natural. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm necessarily as natural at it, even though that I'm a younger generation. I mean, I have girls that are fantastic at it and I'll post stuff, but I don't think I'm very interesting. But I think that I had to get over, it's not about thinking that you're interesting. Like, I'm like, I don't need to tell everybody every moment that I try a new lip gloss. Like that's ridiculous. But I think it's not about that. And my gals have gotten really good about teaching me that this is for them to learn you. So my conversion rates are much better because they feel like they already know me. And so I think that's what social media has been good for me, is just to let them know who I am. So by the time that they get to me, they already feel like they know me. So it's what I can deliver and do they like me in person, but they already feel like they know me. And I think that's what makes the process of conversion much easier for my practices is I don't have to convince them of anything. My work that they've already seen speaks for itself. And they're like, okay, cool. I feel like I already know you and know the person that you are. So this makes that transition easier. So that's how I've used social media for me, is just so they can get a glimpse of who I am as a person. That way, if they think I suck and don't like me, then they don't even need to come see me. Great.
Right. But isn't that great though, that there's so many filters now to find those who love you, come, those who don't, detract. And that's fine. I think it's so efficient,
I think it's way more efficient. That's a really good point too. And I do think that you'll start to differentiate certain patients coming to you, right? So I tend to get a lot of mommies for mommy makeovers naturally because I'm a mom and this is what I talk about and that makes sense for me. I'm not going to get a lot of gals for stripper boobs. That's just not my demographic. I'm not going to necessarily get the snatched waist, the huge butts like some other Miami doctors. Like I think you'll start to get some differentiation of your patients because they're going to gravitate towards you for your type of results. And kind of your clientele. And I think social media is beautiful for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about where your head is at, because you are very much an overachiever. I'm sure you've heard of that. What possessed you to have 3 kids while you're going to school to become a plastic surgeon? That is no small feat when you are going to have to, it's the jungle, you're going to have to compete with those who eat, drink, and sleep plastic surgery. They are going to be the lion in the jungle, and it's so competitive, and you're innately very competitive in this industry. So what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, I think medicine in general is becoming 50-50, right? So 50% of new medical school entrants are going to be female. Like that's shifted now. But most of them are not doing surgical subspecialties. That is still very male dominated. And a lot of it is because of the length of training. So I think naturally you're self-selecting for alpha females that go into that field anyway. So I think there's something innately about us that gravitate towards that anyways, that we're just, like you said, overachievers. We are naturally going to advocate for ourselves. I think that personality does go that way. I remember a female surgeon telling me day one, I was with another female and she got upset about something and started crying, and she like pulled her aside. And I remember this distinctly. It was like, there is no crying in surgery. You put your face on, you go cry in your car later, but you have a job to do, and there is no crying in surgery. And I just remember thinking like, oh God, what did I get myself into? Because it's a tough thing, and you had to develop a tough exterior. That being said, I think, I'm all about balance, and I think you have to be. I have to recognize that, again, I'm not going to be a massive innovator. There's just not enough hours in my brain. I read this really interesting article about some of these really high scientific minds and innovative minds, and they would talk about how they would sit in their office and think and dream and draw and create for hours on end. You don't get that luxury as a female plastic surgeon. You just, and as a mom, like nobody's ever going to bring me lunch and let me just sit and think and drink my coffee all day long. Like that's not going to happen. I have a running list in my mind 24/7 of, oh my gosh, she's got soccer practice that starts at 6. Where's her uniform? I got to wash that. I got to get this together. Ooh, teacher's gifts. What teacher's gifts do I like this? I got to make sure and put that on my list for my nanny to pick up, and so there is a running list 24/7 in this brain, multitasking. And so I'm just not going to be able to do it all. And I've given myself grace to know that I'm not. Again, triage what's important to me, create that balance. There is no such thing as balance. It's whatever you create it to be. So I create my balance of happiness and I let the rest go.
Do you meditate?
In ways. I do like quiet time. So my quiet time is usually like before the kids wake up in the morning. I have my glass of coffee. My husband's really good about going for runs in the morning. I cannot motivate myself to get up at 4 a.m. to run. It ain't happening, but I'll have my coffee. There's moments when I won't pick the kids up right away after school. I'll give myself 30-40 minutes to take the dog for a walk or something, or get massages. My downtime is massages. Yes. So I have gotten in the habit now of scheduling a day. Like I put it on my schedule. I block my day and I go get a massage. I turn my phone off. Nobody can find me. And that's my happy zone. So I just read a dirt magazine. I listen to podcasts and audibles, and I just relax. I go sit in a sauna, and just have a moment to do nothing that's going to stimulate my brain.
Wow, you are singing my song. Boy, I can't believe I haven't seen you.
Right. And then you are.
So tell us one thing about you that we don't already know.
Let's see. I play on a competitive kickball team on Friday nights. Yeah. So It turns out we're not as competitive as I thought. We thought we were better than we were. But I think it's my moment to get some aggression out. I liked sports as a kid. I played soccer and volleyball and ran track. And so I think it's a moment where, and my husband's sporty. So it's great because we get to kind of do a sport together. And we did in medical school. We played softball together and whatnot. And so on Friday nights, we get together with other parents of our kids. Sometimes we bring the kids, sometimes we get a nanny and we go drink beer and play kickball for a couple hours on Friday night. So it's our thing to get together. I mean, the amount of hamstrings that I've pulled and knees that I busted. I mean, I'm embarrassed. Like it takes me 2 days to recover from this stupid kickball game because I'm not 20 anymore. But God, it's fantastic just to get out there, feel like I'm doing something active, being able to socialize with some friends of mine, and be able to spend some spouse time too. I think that's important to really continue to connect with your partner in crime on something other than raising children and medicine, because we share those things innately.
Yeah. All right. And the last question, give me one pearl that you would share with other surgeons kind of your age or coming up?
Yeah.
What would you tell them to do to get into this field now at this crazy competitive time?
From getting into medical school or getting into residency?
Getting into practice.
Just getting into practice. Yeah. So the majority of plastic surgeons do not stick with their first practice, as you know. So like that's, you almost always join somebody and then you go out on your own. I think choose a place that you want to live and build around it. Yep. I do think that that's important because the rest of it will come. And so I think you know that you're not going to make money, especially in private practice, for years. And that's okay. Set yourself in a position where it's okay to not make a lot of money, work ER call, work things like that to keep the ship afloat. But build it now. Don't wait, because you're going to look back 20 years from now and say, dang it, I should have done it. And you really have so many years to practice. I mean, it's amazing because we start so late. I started practicing at 30 years old. I mean, I distinctly remember my dad, who's not in medicine, saying, will you get a job already? Like, I don't understand what you're doing. You're a doctor now. And he didn't understand residency because he wasn't in medicine. And so, it was funny when I got my first job at 30, he's like, yeah, so you get a paycheck yet? You've just been paying all these years. And I was like, I know, but it's a really good job, Dad. So I remember him being like, dude, go get a job, go work. And so, you only have so many years left, right? I only got 30 years if I do it right, maybe less if I retire well, to really practice. And so, your body shuts down at some point, your mind starts to shut down at some point. And so start it now. Don't wait 10 or 15 years wishing for something you could have built from the beginning, recognizing, you're going to pay the price for 5 or 6 years, and that's okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That was it's great talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was super fun. I wasn't even nervous at all. I was worried I'd be, but yeah.
That's terrific. All right. Well, thank you so much. And everybody, I hope you enjoyed our Beauty in the Biz episode. If you did, please go head over to iTunes and subscribe, or go to Apple, I guess, and subscribe, and then give us a good review if you feel so inclined. And then if you want to get a hold of Dr. Hustak, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they could probably send me an email. It's super easy, Kristi Hustak at gmail.com. That's my business account, so you can send it there. Or you can always go, so it's KristiHustakMD.com. So keeping it simple as well. And then ACPS, Aesthetic Center for Plastic Surgery, has a thing at mybeautifulbody.com as well. And you can always reach me through there. There's a drop-down list of the docs.
Right. That's the best part. You guys have such a huge footprint on the internet because all arrows lead back to you guys.
And that's a great benefit as well. So we have links there and then bridges from there. So it's been great.
Okay. Yeah. And if you want to talk to me or give me any feedback, I'm at KatherineMaley.com, or you can certainly DM me on Instagram at KatherineMaleyMBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.